All right, so this will be my third take. For some reason, the last one I thought I was recording, maybe I wasn't. So I've been trying to find the right angle of approach, the right vector to articulate my thoughts without rambling. So I think what I'm going to do is just plunk out chunks and we'll see where we go from there. So I got a couple of comments on from a subscriber on the last video that I did facing the camera. And so the first thing I wanted to drop out, put on the palette, as it were, is that the apocalypse and the revelation being the same word, different languages. It is the revelation, the understanding. When you have a revelation, it's not just that the curtain is pulled back, but that you understand what it is that you're seeing. It's one thing to yank the curtain and not know what you're looking at. Holy shit, it's a bunch of magic or whatever. Demons. But instead, when the curtain is pulled, you are aware of what it is that you're seeing. You've just been waiting for the chance to see it, to understand it. So, in a lot of the Gnostic stuff, as well as several mentions in very specific wording that is definitely implying the same thing. That there are these tiers, levels of heavens and rulerships and governorhoods and whatever throughout, with hierarchies. And, I'm going to be honest, I don't know how much stock to take in such a literal interpretation. However, suffice to say, yes, there's multiple levels. And there's a version of Godhead at the in charge spot for each level, for the next level down, existing within the previous level. So it's like fourth dimensional being outside of a three-dimensional universe kind of thing or whatever, but that's not what it is. Because your perception, your understanding, your relationship and your interaction with God, if you have one, is with something that is simultaneously with you and also outside of the entirety of the cosmos. Because heaven is like the next one up or something. And there's lots of interpretations as to what the revelation actually is. But really it is, each of these books is the revelation of God. It is that God makes an appearance or has an unequivocal message or something like, is the one that yanks the curtain, perhaps. But what the apocalypse is, the revelation, the Great Awakening, is not about the rulers. It's about, I guess, the nature of that which rules the realm that we call Earth. Could be something to do with that. It's a personal thing, so I'm not going to make definitive statements. You go looking for it yourself. That's the point. You can think of the revelation as the encrypted key to all the puzzles and riddles. There's other ones too that were not accepted into canon, and I'm honestly surprised that the revelation to John at Patmos was accepted. In the Gospels, Jesus does some pretty miraculous stuff, but it stays within the bounds of people's lives. And what comes after that? The revelation is very symbolic. It is very full of crazy monsters and like evil sorcerers and shit. And some of it, in my opinion, kind of gives a little credence to the idea of the demiurge story. But there is a conclusion to that story. The demiurge is not in charge of the false pocket universe it created, if such a thing is real. One of the archons, offspring of the demiurge, originally meant to be mockeries of the angels of the presence. One that chose truth, according to the story, and suffered the consequences within the realm, but was then granted grace from above and granted rulership of the highest heaven accessible to entities born within this version of reality, this place. Which I think you could probably dig into sci-fi and find other analogous ways of describing that kind of a situation. The revelation is like the understanding that it is not random. Though the world be run by evil, God is not evil, nor is the being that rules in the position above the highest point that can be, within or touching. It's like heaven stops, this thing starts. But the keys to get through is there. So by that kind of interpretation, looking at something like the hypostasis of the archons, or the reality of the rulers, is what it's also called. But also things that are in things like Ezekiel and Daniel, the visions that they had, the revelation to John is, whether intentionally or not, is a bookend to that. So it's people having to understand that there is a thing happening in the world. There is very little they can do about it. They need to get right with God. The Great Awakening is like people figuring that part out while simultaneously the curtain is yanked, or deciding they need to figure that out as the curtain is yanked. And in the current events, it took me 9.5 minutes to get here. In the current events, if you know what you're looking at, the curtain has been pulled and is being pulled. I've got a pretty active imagination, and I've been able to fathom an idea of what would likely happen if you were to decide you needed to take direct action. Right now, you couldn't. There is literally no way that anyone could organize anything ever to do anything without it being infiltrated very quickly. So, if that was not the case, what would probably happen is you would have some nigh on, if not outright, miraculous things happening to prevent you from boogalooing the government or whatever. Going after the World Economic Forum people, all these weirdo freaking Hollywood people that are convinced that they're aliens or angels or star children seeds or whatever. You could decide to go dispatch all of them and find your gun stop working. Every single one of them. Or something like. You could literally peel back the curtain, rip off the veil, and you would see that the functionaries that are pulling the strings of the human people that claim to be in charge or whatever are the same. That system that I just described in the previous chunk. And that they are doing it by the book, the way it must be done, because that's the way this universe functions, because this universe was begotten by a demiurge. Something that was not meant to be, and yet something of value or redeeming quality was known to be within the universe as we know it. An emissary was sent to collect that. And then after that, anyone born here, I don't know, man. The idea of existing within an event horizon of abomination being the universe. And that it is allowed to be this way because there are people existing within it that are born that had nothing to do with any of the evil weirdness that caused it to exist. They're just there. And so that's one way of looking a little more objectively at some of the things that people believe in, but they don't really understand the why of it, just some of the what of it, a little bit of the how of it. The why of it is an ineffable thing because it exists outside of your universe. So, current events. Kind of ties into the other comment that I received on the last video where I talked to the camera. And you know, when the last time was that there's some fairness to the system. There has to be, or people would just not participate. And you got to keep them engaged. You got to have everybody doing the society thing, because if you don't have everybody doing the society thing, everybody will eventually become a sociopath or a psychopath. Guaranteed. Everyone will fall into that eventually. And it'd be the worst thing ever, because then it's just a bunch of modern humans with a lot of modern technology living like wild animals. And I'm not talking about like wasteland. I'm just saying, like, you know, territorial pissings, land takeovers. What is law enforcement, or people overzealously enforcing the law? Everyone's being a psycho because there's no society in there. what I'm seeing is a large enough people for it to affect anything have yet to awaken to what is being done to them. A lot of people are coming up to it. They're getting there. The problem is there's kind of a 5 week or sometimes less, but I still think it's about 5 weeks public attention span. And if something takes more than 5 weeks to happen, people start to forget. Some people will remember, but some people will forget. I've made it a practice for a couple decades now to be able to remember the things that we're still waiting on. That's why I got into progressive politics, because the idea was getting a little bit more done than this promises and steady, slow, incremental change, which implies that there's a planned release of all the change that happens and all this other stuff. But I can't get behind the idea that these people doing what they're doing with their office and their power are in any way symbolic of like what's actually going on a higher power level. But again, there's this rulers, principalities, princes or whatever thing that ties into like kings and cities on hills and stuff in the Revelation. And some of that is that there's something symbolic to the world leadership. This includes the Pope. Certainly includes the Pope. So I first got into the truth movement over the Iraq invasion in 2003, which of course led to questions about Afghanistan, led to questions about what really happened on 9/11 day. I'm being careful not to just say it, get flagged. Got sucked into an online psyop. Had been brainwashed before it comes to. That was the Obama platform in this limited hangout psyop online. This was in message forums before social media had become a thing. This experimental thing happened. And the promise was that 9/11 truth was going to be gotten into, what really happened. We ended up getting the 9/11 Commission, which didn't make sense, and you had to bend the rules of physics to make their explanation work. We were told in this limited hangout that this would be pursued by the next president. And then after voting for the next president getting in, for the re-election of that president, the promise that Guantanamo would be closed and that there would be military tribunals for all of these people in government that had done war crimes and invaded other countries under false pretenses, lied about weapons of mass destruction. There was nothing untrue about the things we were looking at. We were shown all this stuff and told something was going to be done about it. in the midst of that, as the next election of the next president come along, the story changed to this guy with his private island and his jet. It wasn't initially him. It was a number of people that were found to have some pretty questionable and weird emails in a dump that was given to a media outlet overseas, and involved possibly bad things with children. Now, initially, they tried to remake in the media I want to say refutable, but basically they would come up with a straw man simulacrum of what they are claiming you're claiming, if that makes sense. And so this is where a dude went and shot up a pizza restaurant. Being like, where's the servers? And it's like, dude, what? Guy read a bunch of stuff out of order, got confused. This was an internet thing. And what seems to actually be going on is there's some really weird, twisted people that have been working behind the scenes in the presidential campaigns of some of the most successful people running for office. And there were definitely people doing stuff on the one side, but this was basically all within one political party. And first they tried to distract with a different version of the story that was easy to dismiss as false. Then they muddied the water by using a couple different things about that. I don't know what they're really talking about. Something about they're using kids' meat in the pizzas, and I don't know. No. That's not what anybody said. Oh, well, the thing, and they're doing bad things to kids in the restaurant. No. That's not what they said. It was some weird code words being used in some emails talking about some visits that were definitely going to involve some young children that being there, and that they're a lot of fun. And some of these people having confirmed, posted a bunch of artwork on like Twitter and stuff that's paintings that they own in their homes that are some really weird Sado stuff with little kids. Twisted people who 100% for a fact work for a particular candidate's campaign, all of them. And their emails and all this crazy shit was dumped to like WikiLeaks, which then the media smeared as an illegitimate source. So likewise, coming around 2016, first off, we had this funny little weird PSYOP online thing making promises. And at first I had this weird feeling like I've trained for this. I know how to do this. This is something I'm familiar with. And then that's what I realized. Oh, wait, the memory comes back of this whole Obama's going to lock W and Cheney up for war crimes business, etc. And I realized that it was happening again. And soon after, this thing about child trafficking turned into Epstein. But the thing is that the real stuff was happening, again, with that same previous former candidate who, thank God, didn't win, that had people that worked for her charitable foundation under some investigation at some point. There was a whole slew of stuff of they kept records of their bad dealings. They just did it on private servers that they then tried to destroy, etc. All of this stuff. Heinous people, all of them. Connected to the folks with the weird Sado stuff, etc. being investigated for selling secrets or selling influence access and other such, going around destroying countries, joking about it. There was a lady that worked for her foundation that did work down in Haiti that had got caught smuggling a shitload of Haitian kids, like 6 years old, into like Canada. Or coming in from Canada to, I forget which it was. Kind of some weird situations surrounding that. These are all the same people that Epstein dude had dirt on. So I think we already know who some of these folks are. John and Tony. We'll leave it at that. Anthony. Bill, of course. I don't know how much of that's ever going to get dealt with. It needs to. If there's any justice, it must be. The problem is that it won't fix anything. And that's where enough people wake up, come to the realization, decide they must take action, and get benched. Sat the fuck down, told to watch by a higher power when they go to try and fix what's broken. That is my encapsulation of thoughts on current events. That's not actually been a ramble. But the point is, I am watching, I am seeing many good things happen. Still, I am seeing some crazy ass fog of war. I'm seeing so much dishonesty in the taco sphere, talk, like TALKO sphere, YouTube and podcasts and all of it, the content creators. And I'm also seeing a lot of places where the reporters don't seem to know how to ask the questions right. Still, even the new ones. We're the new media. That was actually an expression that people were saying as they were really sucking themselves into QAnon. Is that they were claiming that the clearly biased podcasts talking about this conspiracy theory were the new media. It's ironic. Or literally everything that is happening, no matter what you try and do, is according to a plan being carried out by something or someone on a level far, far, far above any of us, which is why we would try and take action and get benched by angels. That's the revelation. There is a plan. Just because you don't understand it doesn't mean it isn't working. And if things in your life are not the way you want them to be, first thing you got to do is get right with God so that God can hear you and you can hear God. whatever your God is.